Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to Sleep No More, an Eve Duncan novel by Iris Johansen. Chapter 16. Stella had never liked mountains. She gazed out of the window of the plane at the darkness of the Rocky Mountains below her. Beaches and surf had always been more flattering backgrounds to show her off to advantage. Heat and undulating rhythms and sensuous breezes suited her very well. What could you do with mountains but climb them and smile when someone said how inspiring they were? Boring. As boring as the trip had been so far. It had been bad enough during the daylight hours when she had first boarded the plane. But now that it was dark, all you could see were the red lights on the wings and the shape of the mountains below. She was ready to land, but it was at least another hour until they reached Vancouver, where she would change planes. The only thing that made the trip bearable was the fact that she was on a private business jet. Well, not totally private. There was a Korean businessman toward the back of the Learjet who looked promising but seemed too involved with his wife sitting beside him to be worth bothering about. She had flown with Pierce a few times on private aircraft, and she liked them. They made her feel rather special, and this corporation jet of Nelda's was particularly luxurious. Soft lights, leather seats, and burl wood accents. More champagne? She looked up at the smiling male flight attendant, Mark Telfer, who was standing beside her seat. Good-looking, but probably gay. He hadn't paid her more than polite attention. Why not? She gestured to her empty glass. It's very good. The best. He refilled her glass. If you'd like anything else, all you have to do is call me. I received a note from Mrs. Avery right before we took off, and she said to make sure that I fulfilled your every wish. She specified the year for the champagne and sent a box of after-dinner chocolates for me to serve you. That was good news. Not that she doubted her effect on Nelda was anything but a success. She was always able to gauge her power over people. She lifted her glass. I'll keep that in mind. I can see how you'd want to please the boss. How long have you worked for the Averys? His brows rose. Oh, I don't work for them. This jet is leased to New China Porcelain. We have no direct connection with the Averys, he shrugged. Though occasionally, we're hired to do a discreet run for them. But then they always have their own crews and insist that their names are never listed on any record. They just show up at flight time and board the plane. Like you, Miss Lenslow. Discreet? He grinned and winked. Top secret. How interesting. Her eyes narrowed. Don't you find it curious enough to explore? No, I like my job just fine. And they're only one client among dozens. Not really important. It might be important to Stella. Another weapon to use against Nelda. She would have to keep her eyes open to make sure that she was always one step ahead of her. Perhaps we could talk about it later, she smiled. Do you get to Fiji very often? His smile remained, but he looked suddenly wary. Now and then, he turned away. Be sure and buzz if you need anything. I'm at your service. He hurried back down the aisle. Definitely gay. She took another sip of champagne, but she might still be able to use him. She would have to think about it and see who he... I almost forgot to give this to you. Mark was standing beside her chair again with an envelope. He glanced at his watch. But I'm right on time. 7:27. Mrs. Avery said it had to be right on the nose. Please tell her that I obeyed instructions. Mrs. Avery? She looked at the envelope as she took it from him. Heavy, rich stationery, faintly scented. The same scent she'd smelled when Nelda had been in the motel room that morning. She sent it to you? He nodded. Together with my personal letter and instructions. He started back down the aisle. Nice perfume, isn't it? She stared down at the envelope. She didn't like this. It gave her an uneasy feeling. She slowly tore open the envelope. Nelda's handwriting was bold and clear, and struck with the force of a hammer blow. Stella, did you really think that I'd let you dominate me? Your arrogance is incredible. Yes, I found you desirable. But as you grow older, you learn to pick and choose what you will allow yourself and how to say no to alluring toys. You wish to follow in my footsteps and perhaps supplant me someday. But you would never have learned that, Stella. So, goodbye, temptation. 2 minutes, Stella. Enjoy them. Nelda. Stella's heart jerked in her chest as panic struck. 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, it would be 7:30. What was going to happen at 7:30? They insist their names are never listed on any record. Like you, Miss Lenslow. The airline company has no direct connection with the Averys. She sent a box of after-dinner chocolates. The mountains below looming dark and hard and waiting. No! She threw the champagne glass to the floor and jumped to her feet. No, you bitch! It's not going to happen. She ran to the door of the cockpit. She was aware of the Korean couple staring at her with startled expressions. Mark Telfer, the flight attendant, was running down the aisle toward her as she tried to jerk open the cockpit door. You've got to land, she screamed as she pounded on the door. Let me in! This can't happen to me! Go back to your seat, the flight attendant said soothingly. Have some champagne. I'll ask the pilot to come out and talk to you. Too late, you fool. It's too late. Those damn chocolates. It has to be, she screamed. Because precisely at 7:30, the Learjet exploded into flaming shards of metal and hurtled into the Rocky Mountains below. I've talked to everyone at the hospital who could have any access to special info, Newell said several hours later as he poured coffee into Beth's cup. As far as anyone knows, Pierce has done a flit with his luscious lady. He's gone? Beth shook her head in wonder. I can't believe it. Those last months at the hospital, I'd watch him whenever he was anywhere around me. Before that, the drugs made him only a hazy figure to me. He liked what he did. He liked the power, and everyone's deferring to him. I don't think he'd walk away from it. I don't either, Joe said. But where the hell is he? But I was told one other interesting thing when I was checking, Newell said. The woman who was impersonating Beth is no longer occupying the room where she was quarantined. Before they left the hospital, Stella Lenslow gave an order, supposedly from Pierce, that the woman be moved back to the ward where she evidently was before Pierce pulled the switch. Why didn't Pierce give the order? Newell shrugged. He'd already gone to the car. It didn't ring true to me either. I don't like it, Joe said flatly. Even if he was going to leave the area, why pull the phony patient and leave the suspicion that Beth was still on the loose? He was channel flipping through the news channels. They've checked the local airports for his car and didn't find it. No Pierce, no Stella Lenslow. Maybe not Stella. Eve came into the kitchen from the living room where she'd been monitoring the other set. But they've just found Harry Pierce. Turn on Fox. Joe switched to the station to see a shot of a BMW wrapped around a telephone pole. Police cars and ambulances surrounded the vehicle. Pierce? Where is this supposed to be? A northern suburb, Eve said. He's dead. Suspects? They don't even know if it's murder. It may take days for the medical examiner to determine it, Eve said. No obvious lethal wounds, she paused, but also no broken bones that they can determine. Dead, Beth said dully. Another one. Be happy, Newell said. No, don't be happy. It would have been better if they'd suffered, if they stuffed him into a prison to rot like he did you. Damn it, I wanted him alive. Joe got to his feet. Hell, everyone who could testify to Beth's sanity is being sent to the morgue. He headed for the door. I'm going out there to see if I can find out anything more. Like what? Eve asked. Like where's Stella Lenslow? And does she have any evidence that can help? His lips tightened. And if there's anything in that wreck of a car that could prove what a lying son of a bitch Pierce is to that Santa Barbara police, even though he had them in his pocket. We need something, fast. Why? What suddenly put you on edge? The deaths are piling up, and we have to stop worrying about Beth being thrown back into the hospital and start worrying about her being arrested for murder. It's a little too convenient that a mental patient's two doctors have shown up dead when she's still wandering around loose. My God, he was right. First Gelber, now Pierce, Eve thought. Not only convenient, but chilling. I'll see if I can find anything to use to deflect attention from her and gather any clues out there. Joe turned at the door. Newell, you stay here with Beth and Eve. I should be back in an hour or two. He looked at Eve. I'll call you from the accident scene to let you know what's happening. You'd better, she made a face. I'm not all pleased at staying here and holding down the fort. I believe that position is vastly overrated. But you'll do it, he glanced at Beth. You have a reason to hold down this particular fort. Keep safe, Eve. The door shut behind him, and he strode toward the car parked at the curb. He paused before he opened the driver's door to look up and down the street. Nothing. Yet, he was still uneasy, even though he had no reason to be. There had been no sign that Drogan had been able to follow them to L.A. from 17 Mile Drive. He had even checked the car for bugs before they left the strip and found nothing. However, there were all kinds of devices available these days that weren't detectable, except with equally sophisticated equipment. But Drogan had been very busy if he'd managed to kill both Gelber and Pierce in the span of such a short time. It wasn't likely he'd have also been able to stake out Beth in Valencia. Not likely, but possible. He glanced back at the glowing windows of the house he just left as he backed out of the driveway. It appeared warm and cozy and safe. It would be okay, he told himself. Newell was there, and he would be on guard. His cell phone rang as he drove toward the subdivision entrance. Kendra. You persisted in telling us how busy you are, Kendra, he said when he picked up the call. But you seem to have plenty of time to harass us. What a treasure is gratitude, Kendra said sarcastically. And you don't know anything about harassment. It's an art form. I'll have to teach you someday. I am grateful, Joe said quietly. And Eve is even more grateful than I am. But she wants to keep you out of this. Things are a bit dicey. You mean like Pierce is ending up smashed into a telephone pole? You saw the news story. Why else would I be calling you? It's all over the news channels. Look, I know how Eve feels, and I've been trying to respect it. On the surface, Pierce's getting killed could actually seem to make it safer for Beth and Eve. If you tell me that's true, then I'll reconsider my plans. What plans? He asked warily. She ignored the question. Is the fact that Pierce bought it going to make Drogan less of a danger to you? She wasn't going to give up until she had the answer. What the hell? Talk to her. That uneasiness was still with him, and he wanted to surround Eve and Beth with every barrier he could find. Kendra could be one hell of a valuable barrier. No, someone else has entered into the mix. Someone else has entered into the mix. Nelda Avery, Rick Avery, which one? Kendra asked. I was wondering whether they'd come out of their golden shells and take over the action. Pierce seems to have been a royal screw-up. I think Nelda Avery is tired of hiding in the shadows and paying hush money. She wants a new deck and is determined to get it. But the stakes are very high for her as well as her son. He paused. She committed the murder that started all this business rolling. Kendra gave a low whistle. Yeah, that would give her a giant stake. Should I know anything else before I get there? You're coming here? I'm on my way. I just got on the San Diego freeway. Where am I going? He chuckled. Yes, that would be a good thing to know. Valencia, you know that Eve's not going to be pleased with either one of us. She'll get over it. Are you going to the site of Pierce's smash-up? I just left the house. I thought I'd see if I could find out anything from examining the wreckage. I'd have a better chance, but I can go to the impound lot later and take a look if you don't see anything. Which you don't think I will? He asked dryly, with a mixture of annoyance and amusement. Kendra was moving with her usual full head of steam. I'll try to prove you wrong. How soon will you be here? About an hour, maybe less. Keep me informed. Why, Kendra? Why are you being so determined about this? As I told Eve, I hate leaving anything unfinished. It bothered me that I had to leave without having everything wrapped up. And? Stop pushing me, Quinn. Why should there be anything else? She was silent a moment. Except that I like Eve. I've never had that many friends. When I was blind, I was always defensive and working hard at overcoming my handicap. Then after I gained my sight, I'd get impatient when others who'd had their vision all their lives couldn't see what was right before them. I wanted to shake them. Not exactly an attitude that endears people to you. No, Eve certainly wasn't enamored of you in the beginning. But we worked our way through it. I felt close to her. And when I found out about her daughter Bonnie, I kept thinking about it. I wanted to help her to find something, or someone to replace her. Not possible, Kendra. Oh, I know that. And she'd hate it if she knew I felt. But I thought that if I could give her Beth, it might help a little. Give her Beth? Good God. Too arrogant? Okay, you're right. Besides, I didn't get the chance. But now maybe I can do something to help her keep her. She paused. If it's worthwhile, how does she feel about Beth? Was she a disappointment? Eve had no preconceived ideas of what her sister would be or what she wanted from the relationship. But no, Beth wasn't a disappointment. I'm not exactly sure what Eve feels for Beth, but she wouldn't want to give her up. Good, then it's settled. I'll see you soon. She hung up. Joe was smiling as he pressed the disconnect. That last remark had been typical Kendra, full of confidence and decision. It was her previous words that had surprised him. She had always shown him only her toughness and keen intelligence. Evidently, Eve had managed to reach down and touch another side of her. But then Eve was able to touch most people just by being Eve. His smile faded as he thought about how much Eve had touched and changed him through the years. God, he loved her. And everything might be settled in Kendra's eyes, but there was a darkness looming. He just hoped he could keep it from enveloping Eve as well as Beth. His foot instinctively pressed the accelerator at the thought. Check out that accident scene, then get back to the house. Keep Eve safe. Keep Eve close to him. You've been very quiet since Joe left. Eve dropped into the lawn chair. Beside Eve, and handed her a cup of tea. "It's going to be okay, Beth." "You keep saying that." Beth smiled. "You treat me the way Billy does, as if I'm a little girl. By the way, where is he? Making his rounds?" He took Joe's order about watching out for us seriously. "He takes everything seriously." She lifted the tea to her lips. "He's a good man, Eve. He doesn't deserve all that's happened to him." "He's not complaining. Stop having all these guilt feelings. Though I know everything seems confusing, and it was a shock to realize that Pierce is dead." "It is a shock." Beth looked down into the amber depths of her cup. "But then I seem to be dizzy with shocks. Every time I turn around, something else happens." She made a face. "But it's not as if I cared anything about Pierce. If what everyone tells me is true, he was a monster to me. I can't be sorry he's dead." "Which is an entirely healthy response," Beth smiled, "from a woman who everyone was sure was loony as a hoot owl." "Are hoot owls loony? I wonder where that saying came from. At any rate, no one will say that about you for long. We'll make sure they don't. I can almost believe you." She looked her in the eye. "No, almost. Believe me, Beth." She nodded. "I do believe you, Eve. It's just that Eve's cell phone rang. "That must be Joe. I wouldn't have thought he'd been able to make it to the accident scene by..." She frowned. "It's not Joe. No ID." She accessed the call. "Eve Duncan." "Rick Avery. Miss Duncan?" She stiffened, stunned. "What?" "I know this must be a surprise to you, but I've been told you're with my daughter. I need to talk to her." "Go to hell. You're the last person she needs to talk to. You have a right to be angry. You've been told lies, and you only want to help my daughter. I've heard you're a fine woman, but you don't understand. Let me help you to understand. Your daughter? Where have you been for Beth all these years?" Beth suddenly sat up straight in her chair, her eyes wide. "Rick," she whispered, "he wants to speak to me, Eve." "Yes, don't talk to him, Beth." But she could see she was talking to the wind. Of course she was going to talk to her father. "I'm pressing the speaker. I need to hear what he says." "I don't care." Beth snatched the phone from her. "Rick, it's been so long. I missed you." "Do you think I haven't missed you?" His voice was a little husky. "My best friend, my little girl. They told me that it was better for you if I didn't see you, that I'd disturb you and make you sad when I had to leave." "I wouldn't have cared." "I cared for you. I told them everything had to be just right for you after you got hurt. You had to be treated like a princess, and nothing must hurt you. They did what I told them, didn't they?" "Yes, no one hurt me." Eve's nails dug into her palms. No, nothing hurt Beth because of the drugs that kept her from feeling. She wanted to scream that out at him. Beth's face was radiant with love and joy, and she was believing every word he said. And heaven help her, Eve was beginning to believe him too. Rick Avery's voice was deep with feeling, and his words utterly sincere. Maybe he did believe that what he was saying was true. Maybe Nelda had been so convincing that he had believed her without question. Why not? It would have been easy to believe that Beth didn't need him, and he should go on with his life. What was she thinking? This man preyed on young girls. He was indirectly responsible for the death of that 12-year-old at the chalet. Don't listen to him, Beth. But it was Eve Beth wasn't hearing. Beth was totally focused, totally absorbed in her father. She was paying no attention to Eve. I knew that you weren't to blame. I still have my key, Rick. When I saw it, I knew that you hadn't stopped caring about me. Of course I care about you. Nelda gave me reports about you every month. He paused. But I've been so worried about you since you left the hospital. Why did you do that? Everyone wants to do what's best for you. Nelda said it was some young orderly who filled your head with lies and caused you to run away. He added harshly, I wanted to break his neck for putting you in danger like that. You weren't prepared to face life outside the hospital. Anything could have happened. Everyone was searching for you, even the police. Did you know that? Yes, and Billy is my friend. He wanted to help me. He could see that I wasn't really sick. You are sick, Rick said gently. All the doctors say that's true. You have to believe it so that we can try to get you well. And keep me there another 10 years or more? Beth asked jerkily. I'm not sick. I'm not crazy. Eve says that it was all a plot. Do you know how paranoid that sounds? Rick, you have to believe me, please. I want to believe you. Do you think I wouldn't be over the moon if I thought you were getting well after all this time? But Dr. Pierce says that you haven't altered the... Pierce is dead. What? You didn't know? A car accident here in L.A. At least the police think it's an accident. Joe and Eve aren't sure it's not murder. Good God. It's no wonder you're paranoid with them pouring poison like that in your ears. Dr. Pierce took care of you for years, and your half-sister appears on the scene and you forget everything he did for you. Eve couldn't let that go by without a response. Imprisonment, drug addiction, theft of everything that made life worth living? She was speaking loud enough so that he could hear her. That's what Pierce did for her, Avery. You're mistaken, Rick said, and I'm sorry that you feel that way. It's clear that you wish to help Beth, and I'm grateful, but you couldn't be more wrong. You don't believe her, do you, Beth? Beth looked at Eve. I think I do, Rick. Things have happened. Silence. Then we have to talk this out. I was just going to ask you to come back to the hospital with me, but I want to be fair. If there's any possibility that you're right, I'll be there for you. We'll get everything straightened out, and I'll take you home with me. But if you can't convince me, then you'll go back to therapy. Maybe a new doctor at a facility close to me so I can visit you. It's what I've always wanted anyway. Close to you? Beth repeated. I will convince you, Rick. I swear there's nothing wrong with me. You're already convincing me, he chuckled. Now you remind me of my tough, beautiful girl who put all those other girls in your school in the shade. You're the only one who ever called me beautiful. Her hand reached up and clasped the key pendant. They say something happened at the chalet that night. I don't remember, but I know it wasn't your fault. You don't remember? He sounded suddenly relieved. Then it's better forgotten. We'll start new and bright after we get all this straightened out, he added crisply. I'd come to you, but we couldn't really talk with you surrounded by all those people who think I'm not doing what's best for you. It's better if you come to me. Beth frowned. South Carolina? No, I'm in Los Angeles. Nelda said that no one could find you, but that I might be able to help. As soon as I knew you needed me, I hopped a plane and came here. A little late, Eve said. But she had little hope that it would have any effect. And of course, Nelda had no ulterior motive. I won't let you malign my mother. She wants me to be happy, and Beth to get well. That's her only agenda. Beth, will you come to me so that we can talk? No, Eve said. Where are you? Beth asked. I had to keep away from the big hotels. The media are always after me these days. I'm at a small beach house near Malibu. As soon as you get on the way, I'll give you the address. She's not going, Eve said. I don't trust you or your mother or whatever slime balls you might have waiting for Beth. I'll be alone. I promise, Beth. He paused. But you'll have to be alone too. Don't bring Quinn or your friend, Billy. They would only get in the way. I love you. I've always loved you. Will you trust me? Beth spoke without even a hesitation. I trust you. I'm coming, Rick. She hung up. Don't be crazy, Beth, Eve said. It's a trap. It's not a trap. Couldn't you tell? Rick meant every word he said. He's never lied to me. She met her gaze as she got to her feet. He cares about me. She couldn't argue with Rick Avery's sincerity. It was no wonder Beth had believed him. Eve had tried to punch holes in his words, but she couldn't fault that part of his story. She could see how Sandra, and now Beth, had been caught and held by him all these years. If he was a liar, he was the greatest one she had ever met. So he appeared to be telling the truth. It doesn't mean that he's not being used. What if he's not? We're not sure if his mother is to blame for what happened. I can't remember anything. Maybe it was all Pierce's fault. His plan. Her eyes were glittering in her taut face, and her expression was alight with excitement. I have to go to Rick. He wants to talk to me. We may be able to go home together. You've never had a home with him, she said in despair. Not because he didn't want to give me a home. It was just difficult. She gazed at Eve pleadingly. It's my chance, Eve. I don't want to turn my back on it. It's a trap. No, Rick wouldn't do that. She turned and started toward the garden gate. I'm going. Don't try to stop me. She meant it, and there was no way to argue her out of it. Okay, I won't. She jumped to her feet and strode toward the gate. But I'm going with you. Don't argue. You're not going alone. I'll drive you. Rick told me not to bring. Then Rick will have to change his mind, she said grimly. You can leave Newell and Joe out of the mix, but you're not going to leave this house without me. I'm going with you. I'm taking my gun, and I'm going to search that beach house before you take a single step inside it. It's going to be all right, Eve, Beth said. I feel it. Whatever you believe about his mother, I know Rick is a good guy. I just have to show him that I'm not a mental case. Then we'll put our heads together to try to find out what happened to me. We're already trying to do that, Beth. Eve made an impatient gesture. And we've come pretty damn close without Rick Avery's help. But I can't convince you of that, can I? She didn't wait for an answer as she pulled the garden gate closed behind her and headed around the house toward the car in the driveway. So we'll do it your way and hope that you're right. But there's no way that I'll bank on it. If your father wants to get cozy with you, then he'll have to take me with the package. She got into the driver's seat of the Toyota and started the car. Get in. Faith is a wonderful thing, but I'm sadly lacking in it at the moment. Let's get this over with. You don't have to have faith, Beth said. I have it. You'll realize when you meet him how... Eve! Newell was running out the front door. What the hell is happening? Where? I'll call you. Eve called to him as she drove off down the street. I promise. She turned the corner and headed for the entrance of the subdivision. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. I don't like leaving Newell in the dark. I don't like anything about this. Then let me take you back. I'll drive myself, Beth said quietly. You've done enough for me. Let me take over now. I can't do that. She drew a deep breath and tried to release the frustration that was both useless and emotionally wearing. I have to see it through to the end. I understand that sisters do that for each other. Give me my phone. I'm calling Newell, although it's probably too late to stop him from calling Joe. She dialed Newell's number. I'm sorry, Newell. Rick Avery called Beth and she insisted on going to him when he said he needed to see her. Newell cursed long and emphatically. Are you nuts, Eve? Do you want to set her up? It has to be a trap. She won't believe it, and I couldn't let her go alone. I had no choice. I would have had a choice. I'd have knocked her out, then given her a shot to keep her that way. No, you wouldn't. You'd be doing the same thing I'm doing, trying to keep her safe. I'm not going to take any chances. I have my 38 and I'm not going to go in blind. But you're going in alone, and Joe is going to go ballistic. I'm calling him as soon as I hang up. Where are you going? Malibu somewhere. She saw Beth shaking her head. I can't tell you exactly where. He's going to give us an address as soon as we get in the general area, she added, for Beth's benefit. He didn't want anyone but Beth, but that's not an option. He'll put up with me, and I'll give you and Joe the address when I pull up to the house. That should give you both a chance to get here within a reasonable length of time and still let Rick have his opportunity to convince Beth that he's only misunderstood. Tell Joe that I'm not answering my phone. I'll talk to him at Avery's place. Coward! You bet. I know how stupid this is. I just have to do it. She hung up. Rick's not going to like not having much time alone with me, Beth said reproachfully. Compromise. Eve turned onto the freeway. He gets what he wants. We get what we want. It sounded good, but it might be a shallow victory. Was Drogan behind her on the freeway, or was he waiting at that house in Malibu? You're worried, Beth said. You have a right to worry, considering all you've been through for me. You think I'm foolish, but don't we have to trust people we love? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? She opened her mouth to tell her that Rick didn't deserve trust, but she glanced at Beth and sighed resignedly. Her expression was no longer luminous and excited, but the wonder and wistfulness was just as touching. God, she was hoping Beth's trust wouldn't be betrayed in any brutal way. She reached out and gave her sister's hand a quick squeeze. So they tell me. We're certainly giving it a good try. She took her hand away. Now do a return on Rick's call. Tell him we're on our way and get an address from him. She did what? Joe tried to keep his voice even when he wanted to shout at Newell. I told you to keep watch over. He broke off. This wasn't Newell's fault. Eve had made the decision, and that decision was scaring him shitless. I thought I was watching to keep the bad guys from coming in and attacking, Newell said. I didn't think they'd be running away to meet them. I know. He strode away from the flashing lights of Pierce's accident scene toward his car. And Eve wouldn't have done it if she'd had any way to persuade Beth. At least Eve's on guard. She's not all dewy-eyed like Beth, Newell said. She said Avery is in Malibu, and she'd call us with the address. I've called a taxi to take me to the nearest rental car place to pick up a car. But you'll probably get to Malibu before I do. Maybe. I'm a good hour away. And a second could mean the difference between life and death. Kendra. Look, don't go to the rental agency. I'll call you back. He hung up and dialed Kendra. How close are you to Valencia now? About 20 minutes. Try to make it sooner. He rattled off the address. Pick up Newell. I'm across town, and he has to move fast. Problems. Mega problems. Newell will explain. He hung up and called Newell back. Kendra Michaels will pick you up. Get out there to Malibu. He hung up and called Eve. No answer. He didn't expect one, but he had to try. Eve had made her decision and wouldn't permit any interference. She'd committed to Beth and was attempting to walk a fine line to keep Beth safe and let them have their chance if she was in danger. She was trying to be all things to all people, damn it. And she could get herself killed.